Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, October the 6th, 2010 Municipal Platting Board meeting. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Lendl Story.
Here.
Steve Abel. Ken Fuller.
Here.
Ellen McKay.
Here.
Michael Krieger.
Here.
Anastasia Taylor.
Here.
Jody Moses.
Here.
Carol Stolpe. Daniel Young.
Okay, we have a quorum. There are 6 of us, and it's not what we call a short board, so we will continue on with the agenda as published. And the next order of business is approval of action summaries. We have action summaries for Wednesday, September the 1st, Monday, September the 6th, Monday, September the 13th, Monday, September the 20th, and Monday, September the 27th, all 2010. May I have a motion to approve, please? Ms. Taylor moves. May I have a second? Mr. Krieger seconds. Is there any objection to approval of the action summaries? Seeing none, the action summaries are approved, and we move on to approval of minutes. We have minutes for Wednesday, July the 7th, 2010. May I have a motion for approval, please? Ms. Taylor moves. May I have a second? Mr. Story seconds. Is there any objection to approval of the minutes?
Just abstain from me, please.
Okay. Let the record reflect that Mr. Young has joined us. And seeing no objection, the minutes are approved, and we'll move on to the special order of business. Disclosures. Are there any disclosures for this evening's cases? Mr. Young.
In the case of S11680-3 Creekside Estates, my firm has provided professional services to the petitioner's representative on different projects in the past. We have no ongoing work with this petitioner. However, we are working for a common client now. I have no financial or personal interest in the matters before the board. I can remain impartial in fact and action as a member of the board without personal bias, and my past involvement and personal interest will not prevent me from fairly evaluating the facts of this case.
Thank you. May I have a motion to direct Mr. Young to participate, please? Ms. Taylor, is there a second? Is there any discussion? Does anyone want to hear any further from Mr. Young? Ms. Taylor? No. Is there any objection to Mr. Young's participation? Seeing none, you are directed to participate in the vote for the consent agenda. Any other disclosures? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. And the consent agenda consists of all matters before the board that do not require a public hearing. All items will be approved by motion without debate. Does any member wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, may I have a positive motion for approval of the consent agenda? Mr. Krieger, is there a second? Mr. Fuller seconds. Is there objection to approval of the consent agenda? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved, and we'll move on to old business, of which there is none scheduled on the agenda, and then new business, public hearings. During the new business portion of the agenda, we will follow the procedure published on the front page of the agenda, and that is after the staff presentation is completed on the item, the public hearing will open, and persons who wish to testify need to follow the time limits that are published in the Platting Board Rules of Procedure. Petitioner is the first to speak with 10 minutes. Rebuttal by the petitioner may be allowed when time has been reserved. Petitioner or representatives of groups like community councils or PTAs have 5 minutes, and individuals have 3 minutes. We keep time by the timer up here in the front, and the light is green. During your testimony, when you have 1 minute to go, it turns yellow, and when your time is up, it turns red, and there's a buzzer. And you need to sum up if you haven't by that time. You may be asked questions by the board after your testimony, so remain at the podium. But you may only testify once in any one issue unless questioned by the board. Any individual may have appeal rights resulting from any action that we take, and the appeal procedure is on the front of the agenda. With that, the first case is case S11827-1, Raspberry Center subdivision. May we have staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a request to subdivide Lot 2A Raspberry Center subdivision into 3 lots for proposed lots 2A1, 2A2, and 2A3 Raspberry Center subdivision. The site contains approximately 4.3 acres, and the property is located on the west side of Northwood Street, south of Raspberry Road, and east of Timothy Street. There are 2 zoning districts that impact this property. Proposed Lot 2A1 and 2A2, the 2 northern lots within proposed Raspberry Center subdivision, will be zoned B1B SL, that is Community Business District with special limitations. The special limitations include prohibited uses, prohibited conditional uses, and design standards that are printed on page 7 of the packet. Proposed Lot 2A3 Raspberry Center subdivision will be zoned RO, special limitation, that's residential office space with special limitation. Again, the special limitations are included on pages 7 and the top of page 8 of this packet. The property is zoned R1, single-family residential district, and developed with single-family uses to the north, east, and south. To the east, west, and south. To the north, adjoining the north petition site boundary, the property is zoned B3, and it is developed with a holiday store. Part of the special limitations have to be addressed on the plat. That includes a 44-foot wide building setback easement, which is shown on along the west property boundary. This is also overlain by a 20-foot wide private drainage easement, a 10-foot wide T&E easement, and a sanitary sewer and water easement. The access to the property is from Northwood Street, which is a Class 2 minor arterial, requiring a 40-foot half-street dedication. A 6-foot wide arterial landscape easement is required along the east property boundary, as well as a development setback, the dimension of which varies. At the widest, it's 5 feet at the southeast corner of the property, which narrows as the right-of-way dedication for Northwood Street widens, moving northward. The property is served by public water and sanitary sewer, and access to the property will have to be resolved with the municipal traffic department. Initially, they required, when the packet was written, their comments required that there be 2 access points along the common lot boundaries. One already exists between the holiday store and proposed lot 2A1. I think I've got that right. Yes, 2A1. And 2 other access points were permitted along the common lot boundary. However, since that time, the petitioners have been in discussions with the municipal traffic department, which results in a change to the recommended conditions of approval, which I will outline later. The only other issue is that the property is subject to airport noise, and there needs to be a disclosure of the property's location within the airport noise contours, and construction of residential uses on the property would require construction techniques to mitigate this airport noise that would affect residential dwellings. Both of these items are addressed in recommended conditions of approval. The department does recommend approval of the plat for 18 months, subject to the 8 plat notes, 8 conditions that are on pages 10 through 13 of the packet. Condition 8I addresses the airport noise contours, and condition 8J addresses the construction for mitigation of airport noise. And the amendment to one of the conditions is condition 8B, that deals with the access to Northwood Drive. I was just informed at the meeting that the traffic department requests a plat note stating, a substitute plat note that states driveway access and design must be resolved with the municipal traffic engineer prior to development. I would add of the property.
Thank you, Mr.
Madam
Bryant.
Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's one of the worst ones I've ever made.
Okay, are there any questions of staff? Mr. Krieger.
Thank you, through the chair. Ms. O'Brien, was the language that you just dictated or read to us, was that in substitution for the current 8B?
Through the chair, Mr. Krieger, yes, that is to be a substitute for condition 8B, which the existing condition 8B should be deleted, and that the wording that the municipal traffic department supplied should be substituted for 8B.
So, follow-up. So the significance of that is that access to Northwood Drive might not be limited to 2 common driveways. It depends on what the petitioner works out, or the landowner works out, I guess, with the, was it traffic department prior to development?
Madam Chair, Mr. Krieger, that is correct. There are medians within Northwood Drive, and depending on the proposed access to whatever the development is going to be on these lots, limiting it to 2 access points or limiting it to the location that was originally stated by the traffic engineer may not work. So that is to build some flexibility into the location of the driveway access points. But the original idea behind limiting the access is, yes, Northwood Street is the only access available to this property. However, it is a collector, and if driveway access to collector streets, according to the OSNHP, should be discouraged, but if it is required, then it should be carefully considered where and how many shall be allowed. And Northwood Street is owned by the municipality rather than the state, so it would be the municipality that determines where the driveways are.
My fault. Through the chair, so I take it that you're okay with swapping out the current B for the proposed language?
Madam Chair, Mr. Krieger, correct, because the original language did come from the traffic department, and if they have found an alternate way to address, driveway access to Northwood Street, and they have supplied the wording, then I'm confident that that is what they intended to substitute. for the original comment that was received.
Would that put a prospective buyer who's looking at the plat, looking at the recorded plat, would it put them on notice that there's a potential problem with the property if it just says driveway access and site and design must be resolved? I mean, how would they know whether that's been resolved or not yet if they just saw that note on the plat?
Madam Chair, Mr. Krieger, if and when development plans are submitted, traffic would have approved it, but the actual development plans are reviewed by members of the agencies, including right-of-way, fire department. Traffic will review it again, so it will have to be approved by a number of municipal entities to issue the building permit.
I understood that, but I guess I'm just nitpicking a little bit because the note's going to stay on the plat whether it's approved or not, unless somebody reopens the plat and changes the note. Is that what's contemplated, or just have this sort of a perpetual note saying that there may be a problem, we don't know?
The note is on the plat for the development of the property, and once that condition is met, you're correct, the note would remain on the plat.
Okay.
Any other questions of staff? Ms. Taylor.
Through the chair, would that also mean that Note 8A is no longer relevant?
Madam Chair, Ms. Taylor, that driveway access already exists. It serves the holiday store and it serves the petition site, and it's along the common boundary between the holiday store lot line and the petition site northern property boundary.
So that one is already on the plat. It would show as an easement on the plat. And then the part of the note that says any additional driveways must be approved is going to repeat what we're saying in the next one, that is, driveways must be approved. I'm just trying to, I guess, whack off one of the notes if we could.
Madam Chair, Ms. Taylor, the Platting Board could eliminate that second sentence in Condition 8A and have the existing driveway as a plat note standing alone.
Any other questions of staff? Mr. Story.
Yes, through the chair to staff. My understanding is that Note 8A, that's just identifying that there is an easement there and any access to Northwest Drive would stay within that easement. The amendment to 8B would be just the driveway access and design would be resolved within the easement that is indicated in 8A.
Madam Chair, Mr. Story, actually, no. The driveways that are addressed in proposed Condition 8B will be new driveways.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing, and could we hear from the petitioner or the petitioner's representative, please?
Madam Chair, board members, staff, my name is Mark Ide. I'm with Syntec Surveying in Anchorage, and I'm representing the petitioner on this plat, Devonham Properties. And we have no objections to staff's recommendations for the platting of Raspberry Center subdivision. We're currently working with certain departments and utilities to resolve these issues as we speak. No objections.
Okay. Are you done then?
We're done.
Okay, you have 9.5 minutes for rebuttal. Are there any questions for Mr. Ide? Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify in case S11827-1 Raspberry Center subdivision? Come forward and state your name, please.
My name is Dick Roston, LLSS2M. I'm an attorney in town representing Holiday, Alaska, Inc. Dave Hutchin from Holiday, head of real estate, is also here. We have materials in your packet at page 85. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at those. Basically, Holiday has a access agreement as successor in interest to share access, ingress and egress onto Northwood Drive, and we had made some recommended changes to the proposal 8A and 8B just to make sure that our rights are not denigrated during the process. And if you're, and those, rather than repeat precisely, those are in the packet. If you were to change the proposal, as staff recommends, we would recommend adding to the end of 8A language that basically says, except if the owners of both lot 1A and lot 2A agree to move the driveway at the common lot line further south, such driveway may be located further south subject to approval from the municipal traffic department. So two lot owners and the municipality would have to agree that that could be moved. And the proposed change to 8B, when they said things would be resolved with the traffic engineer prior to development, we would ask that add the words and not violate the rights of the owners of lot 1A. As my letter points out, there is a dispute going on currently about that access agreement. We just don't think that it should be resolved one way or the other, if you will, here, and we're seeking to have those be preserved. Finally, I note that the access agreement itself appears in the certificate to plat and does not appear on the plat notes at the moment, and we believe that it needs to appear on the plat notes. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Roston? Mr. Krieger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Roston, taking the last point first, how would you suggest that the access easement appear as a plat note? Do you have some language for that, or? I
think it's in reference to the access agreement itself on the plat notes, book and page, subject to the rights under the access agreement. Reference on book and page, such and such.
A second question, if I may. Have you discussed with the petitioner or the petitioner's representative your proposed additional language to 8A, and I guess now we're doing it on the fly to the modified 8B?
We had submitted this language as part of the packet. I assume that the petitioner had seen it. I have not obviously had a chance to discuss what happened on the fly this evening. But we did write a letter to the petitioner's attorney saying that we had submitted comments.
That's I see your August 26th letter is copied to a couple people that have lawyers' letters after their names. Is that the letter you...
No, but our office wrote a separate letter to a petitioner's lawyer in the lawsuit saying we had commented and intended to appear.
I don't know whether the rest of the group or the board heard it, but I wasn't able to copy you or get the language that you were suggesting with respect to 8A. And
I picked it up from that second page of my letter, but I'll say it more slowly. Except that if the owners of both lot 1A and lot 2A-1 agree to move the driveway at the common lot line further south, such driveway may be located further south, subject to approval from the municipal traffic department.
So those are the last three lines, or most of the last three lines of the text on 87 in the second paragraph there?
Correct.
That's all the questions I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krieger. Other questions for Mr. Roston? Mr. Fuller?
Yes, thank you. These diagrams, I don't see the station. It currently exists, right?
The holiday stores currently exist, yes, on that.
You have driveways now.
We have there's a easement, there's a driveway right now, right at the lot line between what is now Lot 1A and currently Lot 2A. There is a separate, the original access agreement that was recorded some years ago gives us rights across several lots, right for ingress and egress onto Northwood. The copy of that is attached to my letter. It's also earlier in the packet. These lots have changed names over the years. Originally it was Lot 1B and 1C. It's at page 88 and 89 of your packet. In particular, bottom page 88, grants upon owner for himself and his successors and signs hereby grants upon lots 1B and 1C, which under the proposed replat in essence will become lots 2A1 and 2A2. In favor of lot 1A, a right of access upon and across lots 1B and 1C in locations where the users of lot 1B and lot 1C have ingress and egress to and from lots 1B and 1C to and from Northwood Street. Part of the problem we have right now is that there's no full left turn access when you're leaving the holiday store going out on Northwood. There's a median there. Right. So you cannot make a full left-hand turn. So we are interested in having further access to the south where customers may have full left and left out access.
I see. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Roston? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to testify in case S11827-1 Raspberry Center subdivision? Come forward and state your name, please.
Hi, my name is Brian Dork. I am a property owner abutting.
What's your last name?
D-O-R-K, Dork. I'm the property owner of Timothy abutting the property that's in question. And I might be jumping the gun a little bit. I guess I don't understand anything that's going on. I'm ultimately obviously concerned about what the final product is going to be since my backyard abuts this property. I don't know if this is just a rezone, if there's anything that's put out there about what plans are being done with these possibly, if there's anything that's been put forward, if nothing has been put forward, if the rezone is granted, at another point in time will something come forward for the people on the street to question, I guess, is what I want to say. I was here before with the rezone for him for the property, and now we're doing another property. I guess I'm just kind of wondering what all is transpiring, or if any light can be gleaned on what the final product might be.
This isn't a rezone; it's a subdivision.
Right.
We're not changing the zoning at all, or any of the limitations.
Well, all we're doing is trying, I guess, from what I can understand, is one lot wants to be subdivided into three. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. You're not changing the zoning. I understand that. But there has to be obviously some type of a reason for that to happen. There must be some end product. And I was just wondering if this is the right point in time to question what that might be or not.
We haven't been given information about that, so...
Okay. So if it is granted and then something else will be done, I guess then at another point in time is where I guess what would end up wanting to be done with these lots would be addressed at a further point in time down the road. Is that correct?
Well, once the property is subdivided, whoever purchases the property has the right to develop it according to...
Absolutely. And that will obviously then, I would assume, come before the, whatever board it is again at that time, once that would happen. Is that true?
It will not come before the Platting Board.
No, I understand that, but another board, I guess, is my question. I'm just an idiot in the room here. I'm just, trying to figure out what the process is to find out what is actually, eventually, if before something is built there, are we as neighbors going to be able to, I guess, have some type of information about what might or might not be, planning on being done with the property.
Ms. O'Brien?
Madam Chair, the zoning, as you said, is in place. There are special limitations that have prohibited uses. Those are outlined in the staff packet. If the proposal for development is an allowed use, it meets the special limitations, it is not required to go before any further board. There would be no further public hearing required. But any development does have to be allowed by the zoning, district regulations, and the additional special limitations that were placed on that zoning district. So one is a community business district with special limitations. It does have prohibited uses, prohibited conditional uses. Those are outlined in the packet. And it does have design standards. The same is true of the RO, which is residential office with special limitations. Provided the proposed use meets all the zoning requirements and all the special limitations, the property owner or the proposer of the development, they may be different, they may be the same as tonight's petitioner, they can develop it outright without further public review.
Very good. Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? Because I might be the second idiot in the room. Are those...
Who's it to?
This is to you, Ms. O'Brien. Are those limitations that you referred to, are they in the conditions, or are they somewhere else?
Madam Chair, Mr. Krager, they're not in the conditions, they're in the actual zoning ordinance.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to testify in case S11827-1 Raspberry Center subdivision? Come forward and state your name, please.
Michael Clough. I'm also a property owner on Timothy Street.
Would you spell the last name, please?
C-L-U-F-F.
Thank you.
I understand the other gentleman's frustration with this, and I realize that your job here tonight is to just look at the facts of whether they've met certain qualifications and to subdivide this property. But what comes to question is why, because it used to be exactly the way they're now asking to do it. And in the course, as you know, the packet this thick of the changes and changes to zoning, changes to the special limitations, then they changed the size to one lot, and now putting it back exactly the way it was before they changed it. So it's just, I think the reason for that does come into question, and it's of interest to the neighborhood. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Clough. Anyone else wishing to testify in case S11827-1 Raspberry Center subdivision? Anyone at all? Would the petitioner care to use the 9.5 minutes you have left for a brief?
Yes, please. All I request is that
state your name.
My name is Sean Debenham, and the owner of Debenham Properties, the owner of the property in question tonight.
Thank you.
We're okay with everything except for the request for Holiday Gas Station. I feel that if this language is put into place, that it would be bypassing the judicial system that we're currently going through. And I don't have my attorney here, and this shouldn't go forth. Basically, if their wording goes forth, we have to have their permission to start moving our driveways and such, and that's not right. We're currently we're suing each other. Everybody's suing everybody right now. And it really needs to play out in the courts. It shouldn't be playing out in the replat of this land. So I just ask that you leave the staff recommendations the way they are. If there's any questions, I can free to answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Debenham? Mr. Fuller.
The page 41 on this packet shows Raspberry Road and Northwood Street and the Holiday, and it designates a specific access at the south end of the what appears to be a lot line.
On page 41?
41.
You can see the lot line there. It's got a bubble on both sides. And you can see the shared driveway there. And that's the actual driveway that's in place right now.
That's the one that's currently being used?
It's currently being used, yes.
And that goes across Northwood? Is that a break in the median, or is that?
There is a break in the median that allows a left in, but it does not allow a left out.
Oh, I see. Okay. So they're currently not transacting across to the south of that adjoining lot? The only picture that's here is like an old one that doesn't have any building on it at all.
The driveway is not permitted for a left out. I can tell you that.
No. I mean, they're not transacting across the remainder of that lot to the south.
No, they're not. That's our property.
It's only one driveway. Okay.
Yeah, currently there's only, what's asphalted is what you see on page 41.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Krieger.
Thank you. Through the Chair, Mr. Debenham, thank you. I want to dialogue with you, I guess, on this, your concern about the proposed modification that Mr. Roston and his client are suggesting. Both of you are saying you don't want this board to step in the way of the lawsuit, and I don't think anybody I don't think the board wants to interfere with the process of the courts. But you're both also saying that action or no action either way is going to affect how the court might rule on it. So I guess I wanted to ask you how, if you I recognize your attorney is not here, but what is there about the language that Mr. Roston is suggesting, this part that says accept that? Have you given any, how would that affect your rights under the plat note? I mean, I understand you object to it, but I'm not quite sure I understand why that language would tilt the balance one way or another.
Well, again, I'm not represented. I don't have my attorney here, so I don't have a full knowledge of how this affects my rights. I do know it does affect them, and that this core question right here is really the fundamental question of our suit against each other. And so if this gets enacted, it goes a long ways to resolving the dispute in their favor. So as you read here, it says, if the owners of both Lot 1A and Lot 2A agree to move the driveway after a common lot line further south, well, if I want to move the driveway and I own my land, why should I have to have holiday agreement to move the driveway? If I want to put a driveway in further south and it's permitted by the traffic department, why should I have to go to holiday to resolve that? Right? But if you put this plat note in there, now if I want to put in my driveway, then I have to go to holiday and get their agreement, which they may or may not grant. But the bottom line is that this is the whole question behind the lawsuit that's going on right now is whether or not we're beholden to holiday in this fashion.
So one of you owns Lot 1A and the other one owns Lot 2A1. Is that?
That's correct,
okay.
Yes.
So what you're saying is this language sort of implies that whoever's the Lot 1A owner has to agree before the Lot 1A owner can move his land, and that's your concern?
The driveway, that's correct, yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Bryant.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question of, either the petitioner or holiday store representative or both?
Certainly.
My question is this access easement, it's a private agreement that was recorded on the properties between two property owners, whoever they were at the time of the agreement, is that correct?
Yes, neither one of us were the owners at that time.
Both? Okay.
It was a private agreement, yes.
It was a private agreement. Can I make a follow-up comment then, Madam Chair?
Certainly.
Actually, the access that the city is concerned about is the actual access onto Northwood Drive, not the resolution of a private agreement between two property owners. It's actually the municipal traffic department that's going to determine what is an acceptable access to Northwood Drive. And that's what the municipality, in light of the official streets and highways plan standards, traffic flow, placement of driveways, that's what the municipal interest is. As how access is shared through a private agreement, the municipality is not party to that private agreement. And I don't think that that can be resolved by the municipality or by the Platting Board tonight. The only thing I could recommend is that the two property owners both work with the traffic department to find out which access would work out best, but the final decision is going to be the municipal traffic department where those driveways are actually going to be allowed to be constructed. There is one constructed now. Thank you for your patience, Madam Chair.
Certainly. Are there any other questions of the petitioner or of staff? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Debenham.
Thank you.
Close the public hearing and the matter rests with the board. I have a positive motion on approval of the plat, please. Mr. Krieger.
In the case S11827-1 Raspberry Center subdivision, move to approve the plat for 18 months subject to the first 7 conditions in the department's recommendation, and condition 8 as modified as follows. 8A, delete the final sentence of 8A. 8B, delete 8B in its entirety and add the following: driveway access and design must be resolved with municipal traffic engineering prior to development. And the remaining sections of 8C through J as is.
Mr. Fuller seconds. Mr. Krieger, would you speak to your motion, please?
I'm going to support the motion. I tried to listen to the arguments from the Holiday Inn folks and the petitioner with respect to the requested language by the Holiday Inn folks, and I think that it's that coupled with staff's suggestion about don't interfere with private landowners. I think that the status quo can remain in effect without adding the language that was proposed by the Holiday Inn and its council. And if matters are resolved between the two landowners differently in a court, then I don't think that's going to prevent the plat from being modified accordingly. So I'll support the motion.
Any other discussion? Ms. Taylor?
Through the chair, I would like to offer a friendly amendment that we keep the last line on condition 8A. The last line states, additional driveway must be approved by the municipal traffic department. And if we delete that one, we're restricting the rights of the Debenham properties to put another driveway on there, which if municipal traffic says they don't mind, then I don't mind either.
I would accept that as a friendly amendment. I thought I was just helping to delete some language that staff had told us was superfluous and could be taken out. So if it's, and I thought it was actually in response to your question that they took it out. But if you think it's important, I'm happy to have it back in, too.
If I may, if we're going to keep the first part of the note, I think I'd like to keep the second part as well.
Mr. Fuller? Well, either you accept the friendly amendment or you don't, and Ms. Taylor proposes it as an amendment, and we vote.
Yeah. Yeah, delete B and swap it out for that language that staff suggested about driveway access and design be resolved with the traffic engineer.
Okay. Now, does everyone understand the motion? Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes and the plat is approved for 18 months. The next case is case S11611-3, Don Ridge subdivision, second 18-month time extension request. May we hear from the staff, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you mentioned, this is a time extension request. It is the second one. The preliminary plat was originally approved July 18th of 2007 to create 24 lots within a 4 3/4 acre BLM lot, and the plat is subject to 14 conditions. Last year, March 4th, 2009, the board did approve the first-time extension to extend the preliminary plat approval to July 18th of 2010. No additional conditions were placed on the preliminary plat at that time. This is the second-time extension. The request was received prior to the July 18th expiration date of the preliminary plat approval. Basically, the petition site and the surrounding property is all zoned R1. This is surrounded by single-family residential development. The sizes of the proposed lots within the Don Ridge subdivision range from approximately 6,000 square feet up to 7,500 square feet. That meets the minimum lot size of the 6,000 square foot required by the R1 district regulations. The gross density is approximately 5.5 dwelling units per acre, which meets the land use of the comprehensive plan. This property is located on the north side of East 72nd Avenue. It's between Lake Otis Parkway to the west and Spruce Street to the east. Access to the two interior cul-de-sacs that are proposed to serve this subdivision will be from East 72nd Avenue. East 72nd Avenue is built to municipal standards. The project management and engineering required no additional improvements for that right-of-way. However, a 5-foot dedication was required in the preliminary plat approval to meet the official streets and highway standard plan for this, for East 72nd Avenue. There is a subdivision agreement that is required, and it was signed. The applicant did sign the subdivision agreement in 2008, and the actual plans were approved in 2009. PM&E stated no objection to the second-time extension request, as did the Municipal Right-of-Way Department, Flood Hazard Review, Watershed Management Services, and the Municipal Traffic Department all had no objections or no comment on the requested time extension. On-site water services had no comment because the property is to be served by public water and sanitary sewer. AWWU also had no comment on this time extension request. Basically, I don't believe any work has occurred on the site to date. Might be as a result of the downturn in the economy and the reduced demand for new housing stock. So the current conditions are substantially the same as those that existed when the Platting Board originally approved this plat. Based on the non-objection from the reviewing agencies, the department does recommend approval of the second 18-month time extension to January 18th, 2012. None of the reviewing agencies requested any additional conditions be placed on the preliminary plat approval. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bryan. Any questions of staff? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Could we hear from the petitioner or the petitioner's representative, please?
Madam Chair, members of the board, my name is Charlie Forbes. I'm representing the petitioner, Jerry Harmon, and we respectfully request an approval of the second time extension. If there's any questions.
Okay. 9 minutes, 45 seconds of rebuttal. Any question for Mr. Forbes? Mr. Young.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, one of the recommendations is to resolve the soil remediation with the DEC, and I was wondering what's the nature of, or what's the status of the soil remediation?
That's all been closed out with DEC. All that was a fuel spill filling up a front-end loader, and he hauled off the material in accordance with DEC, and then just didn't follow through with closing it out, and we closed it out a couple of years ago. And we've got the documentation for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Forbes? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to testify in case S11611-3, Don Ridge subdivision? Anyone at all? Yeah, Mr. Forbes, would you care to use any of your rebuttal time?
No.
He indicates no, so we'll close the public hearing and the matter rests with the board. May I have a positive motion regarding the second time extension, please? Ms. Taylor?
In the matter of case S11611-3, Don Ridge subdivision, I motion for approval of the second 18-month time extension to January 18th, 2012.
Is there a second? Mr. Young seconds. Ms. Taylor, would you speak to your motion?
Based on the information presented in the packet, none of the reviewing agencies or none of the municipal departments had any concerns, and I don't either.
Is there any objection to the motion? Is there any other discussion? I'm sorry. Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes and the second time extension is granted. Okay, that brings us to the end of new business. And is there any persons to be heard Any reports of any kind? Board member comments? May I have a motion for adjournment, please?
Move to adjourn.
So moved. We are adjourned.